Hey, hi guys. From this video, I'm planning to explain you the Spring Security flow. And if you see this diagram, the flow will look like this. And there are a couple of important modules here: authentication filter, authentication manager, authentication provider, and the user or detail service. And if you see the communication between all this module, there is an association relation. A filter is contacting manager, and the manager is contacting the provider. Provider is taking the help of user detail service. So let's see how step one will get started. Assume like there is one resource in the server that is protected by the Spring security when user are trying to call that protected resource. If user send a request, initially the authentication filter will take that request and this will validate a user is authenticated or not. If user is not authenticated, what the filter will do, it will give you the login page to the end user. After entered by the details username and password, once the user got submitted the request, the authentication filter will capture that information and store that information into this object, user password authentication token. Then the filter will share that information to the manager. Manager will share the same information to the provider. So provider will validate based on the user entered information and the registered details available inside the user detail service. If both details are matching, the provider will create one successful authentication object that will keep inside the security context. So this is how the flow will work. I want to write one simple example to describe the Spring Security flow. If you see this diagram, or if you want to use a Spring Security flow in your application, so two sections of information we need to provide as a developer. The first section is the protection related, and the second section is registered user information. If you see here the my account, so what I'm telling to the authentication filter, if any user call this endpoint, this should be authenticated. And my balance, I'm not expecting any authentication. It can be called by anyone. And if you see this, this is the registered users I'm telling. Only Madhav can allow at this as per this example. So this application can call by only Madhu and the password 12345. So this is the registered information. Let's see how can you write this in a example manner. I'm using this example, Spring Security example 1, and see the setup related first. Spring Security starter dependency, and if you see the controller section, I return one endpoint. It's a get request. If any user call this endpoint, it's just returning some static information. Same like I return one more controller. My balance is the endpoint. If any person call my balance, I'm returning some static information like this. If you see the configuration section, there I provided the protection related information. So this is how I'm telling the Spring framework this need to be protected, this endpoint need to be protected, and this I am not expecting any protection. This can be called by any person. At the same time, I need to provide the registered user information also. If you see here, this is the way we need to provide the registered user information in a Spring Security. So this is very basic way of providing the user registered information. This is not suitable in the production. This is just for testing purpose. Okay, as per the diagram, I given the production related information and also registered user information, and I have the endpoints to protect my account and my balance. I am not expecting any protection. Let's run this example and see. It's already running stage. Let me this is calling in 8081 port. Let me call the endpoint. Okay, let me stop this. Okay, server started in 8081 port. Let me call the first call the non-secure endpoint. So this is not protected by the Spring. Let me call it. What will happen? So I got the response. Now if I'm trying to call the secure endpoint, let's see what will happen. It's redirected to the login page and it will expect username and password. If I enter wrong password, it's not matching, saying like a bad credentials. So what will happen? The user entered information and the registered details are not matching. So that's where it's not allowing me to call it. So the actual password is 12345. Let me enter the correct password. So now I'm able to call the endpoint. Let me run this in debug mode and see is it following the flow what we discussed or not. Right click, debug as Java application. Okay, now it started 8081 in a port. Application is running in debug mode. Let's see. I want to call the secure endpoint. It will redirect to the login page. Let me enter it. Okay, if you so you see the flow, the request is lands upon here. This is the provider. Now if you see the diagram, provider is actually implementation class for the authentication manager, and we have an association with authentication provider. Now if you see line number 96, we have a list of authentication providers. One provider manager contains multiple authentication providers. There is a one-to-many association. The same thing is describing here. So this is actually an interface, and you can see the implementation classes. In a basic flow, it will use this. It will this will act as a provider, and if you see inside this, there are some user details. So this actually provides the registered user information. Likewise, so whatever we discussed here, the same thing is reflecting when you run the application in debug mode. Hope this helps.